Every day, Emily walked the same path from her small apartment to the grand hotel where she worked. The streets were noisy, filled with honking cars, people rushing past each other, and music playing from distant stores. But inside her mind, Emily heard a different kind of music: piano notes. Gentle and full of emotion, playing again and again, like a hidden soundtrack to her life, to most people. She looked like just another young woman heading to work, wearing simple clothes and carrying a worn-out bag. No one would guess that once she had been called a musical prodigy. That once she dreamed of playing in big concert halls, of seeing her name on posters, of making people cry and smile through her music. But that was before life pushed her dreams deep underground. When she entered the hotel, the atmosphere changed. Completely. The air smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume. Everything was elegant: the marble floors, the gold-edged menus, the quiet jazz music playing in the background. Emily nodded politely to her coworkers, tied her apron, and began her shift. Her job was simple: take orders, serve food, clean up, and smile just enough so guests wouldn't complain. No one knew that her fingers, which now carried heavy trays and folded napkins, once danced over piano keys with grace. No one saw the tiny details: how she tapped her fingers in rhythm while waiting near the kitchen window, how her eyes lit up for a second when a piano piece played faintly in the background. But she noticed her body remembered, her heart remembered. Back in high school, Emily had been known for her piano skills. She had won local competitions, and her teachers said she could go far. Her father was her biggest supporter. Every evening after work, he would sit with her as she practiced, sometimes falling asleep in the chair beside her. She still remembered the way he used to smile when she played his favorite piece. He didn't know much about classical music, but he said her piano made him feel things he couldn't explain. Then everything changed. Emily's father died in a sudden car accident. Just a few days after her 16th birthday, her mother, already struggling with health issues, began to deteriorate quickly from the stress. Bills piled up. The small savings, they had disappeared within months. Emily had to make a choice: stay in school and chase a dream, or get a job and keep the lights on. She chose her family. She sold her beloved piano. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done. The money helped cover rent for a few months, but the empty corner in their apartment where the piano once stood always reminded her of the music she had lost. Over the years, she worked many jobs: grocery stores, cafes, babysitting, anything to earn money. And now, at the hotel restaurant, she had a stable position. Pay wasn't great, but it was enough. Enough to survive, enough to keep going. Still, the music never left her. Every night, after the guests were gone and the restaurant was quiet, she would find herself drifting toward the lounge area. There, sitting under soft yellow lights, was the grand piano. No one played it anymore. It was more decoration than instrument. But to Emily, it was a symbol of the life she could have had. She would sit at the piano bench, press the keys softly so the sound wouldn't carry far, and play. She played her old favorites: Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, but she also played her own pieces, ones she had composed in her mind during long shifts or bus rides. She never wrote them down, but they stayed in her fingers. Sometimes her coworkers would walk by and hear faint music. They'd stop and listen for a moment before moving on. No one knew it was Emily. They just thought the hotel had turned on a recording. No one ever expected the shy, quiet waitress to be the one creating such beautiful sounds. One night, while she was playing a soft melody she had written about her father, a janitor who worked the night shift stopped to listen. He stood behind a pillar, completely still, until she finished. When she stood up and saw him, she froze, thinking she was in trouble. "Don't stop," he said gently. "That was the most peaceful thing I've heard all week." She gave a small smile, nodded, and walked away without saying a word. Moments like that kept her going. During the day, Emily continued her job. People still didn't notice her. Some guests treated her kindly, others ignored her completely, but she didn't mind. She had accepted her place in the background. She had learned to protect her heart from disappointment. She had stopped hoping for anything more, until the night when everything began to shift. The hotel was preparing for a special event. A famous millionaire, Gregory Hawthorne, was hosting a private party at the hotel restaurant. He was known for being loud, confident, and a little cruel. Emily had served him once before. He had mocked her for spilling a little water, called her a kitchen girl, and laughed while others joined in. I'd walked away quietly, but the memory stayed with her like a bruise on her heart. This time, Gregory was hosting a night dedicated to young artists. He was going to showcase new talent in painting, poetry, and music. Some of the performers were handpicked by his assistants. Others were invited through online auditions. Everyone in the hotel was excited. The restaurant staff worked extra hard to make sure everything was perfect. Even Emily could feel the nervous energy in the air. That afternoon, the event coordinator received bad news. The pianist scheduled to perform had canceled due to illness. Panic spread. There was no time to find a new performer, and the program needed live music. The lounge manager, who had heard Emily play once or twice in the quiet hours, spoke up. "There's someone here who can play," he said. The coordinator raised an eyebrow. "Who?" The manager hesitated, then said, "Emily, one of our waitresses." The coordinator laughed. "A waitress? You're joking?" "No," the manager said firmly. "She's good. Really good." After some arguing, they decided to ask Gregory himself. Maybe he'd find the idea entertaining. Gregory smirked when he heard. "Let's see what a dish carrier knows about music," he said with a chuckle. "If she's terrible, we'll all have a laugh. If she's good. ... Well, miracles happen." Request was passed down the chain until it reached Emily. She was in the back room, folding napkins, when her supervisor approached. "Emily," he said carefully, "they want you to play at the event tonight, on the grand piano, in front of everyone." She froze. "What?" she whispered. "They need a replacement. The original performer canceled," the lounge manager told them about your playing. Emily's heart began to pound. I haven't played in front of people in years. I've never performed in a room like that." Her supervisor looked at her kindly. "You don't have to say yes, but maybe this is your chance." She stood there for a long moment, torn between fear and something deeper, a tiny voice inside her that still believed in the dream she once had. Finally, she nodded slowly. "I'll do it," she said, barely above a whisper. That night, she prepared to walk onto the small stage near the piano, dressed in the same simple uniform she wore to serve food. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She wasn't sure what would happen, but she knew this was a moment she couldn't ignore. She would play. Pained. Not because Gregory wanted entertainment, not to prove anything to anyone. She would play because the music inside her refused to stay silent any longer. The evening of Gregory Hawthorne's art event arrived, and the entire hotel buzzed with nervous excitement. Fancy cars rolled up to the entrance, and well-dressed guests stepped out laughing and chatting. The women in sparkling gowns, the men in fitted tuxedos. It felt like the whole city's elite had come to see what the millionaire had planned. Gregory's parties were famous. Every detail had to be perfect. The lighting, the food, the seating. Everyone expected an elegant night full of class, money, and art. Inside the restaurant, the staff moved quickly. Extra flowers were placed on tables, crystal glasses were polished again and again, and the menu had been prepared to please even the pickiest guest. The kitchen buzzed like a machine chef shouting orders, pots clanging, and waiters rushing out with trays. In the middle of all this, Emily stood in the staff area, her heart pounding so loud it almost drowned out the noise around her. She had just said yes. Yes to performing in front of the richest people in the city. Yes to sitting at that piano in front of Gregory Hawthorne and all his powerful friends. Yes to showing a part of herself she had buried for years. Her hands trembled. Her breath came fast and shallow. She stared at herself in the mirror above the sink. Same uniform, same apron, same shy girl. But something had changed. Somewhere deep inside, something had cracked open. The lounge manager, Mr. David, came over and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to prove anything, he said softly. Just play like you always do, like no one is watching. She gave a tiny nod, grateful for his words, though fear still sat heavy on her chest. What if she messed up? What if they laughed at her? What if her hands forgot everything the moment they touched the keys? Out in the lounge, the piano stood in its usual place, but tonight it was in the spotlight, literally. Soft white light focused on it, like a stage waiting for a star. Chairs were arranged in a half-circle around it, and Gregory sat in the front row with a glass of red wine in his hand, surrounded by his usual group of rich admirers. He looked completely relaxed. One leg crossed over the other, cracking jokes with the man beside him. She's actually going to do it, he said. Loudly enough for people nearby to hear. Let's see if she spills notes like she spills water. A few people chuckled. One woman leaned over and whispered, Is she even trained? Gregory smiled. Who cares? I'm in the mood for a disaster. The lights dimmed slightly. The event host stepped onto the small stage and tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, Tonight, we are proud to bring you fresh voices in art, poetry, and music. Our next performer comes from right here in our hotel. You may have seen her before, but tonight, you'll see her in a very different light. Please welcome Mealy. Shh. The room quieted. Emily stepped out slowly from the side, her eyes scanning. The audience just once before, she quickly looked down. She didn't wear a gown or jewelry. It's just her plain black trousers, white shirt, and apron. For a moment, the room felt confused. A few people shifted in their seats. One man whispered, Is this part of the show? But then Emily walked to the piano, sat down carefully, and placed her hands on the keys. Her fingers rested there. For a moment, she closed her eyes. The room waited, and then she began to play. First notes were soft and uncertain, like raindrops falling on a still pond. But slowly, the sound grew. Her fingers moved with more confidence, flowing across the keys like water. The melody she played wasn't something most people had heard before. It wasn't Bach or Beethoven. It was hers, one of her own compositions. It started simple, almost like a lullaby, filled with gentle sorrow. Then it rose into something deeper, stronger. The music spoke of pain, but also of survival. Told a story that didn't need words. A story of a girl who had once had a dream, lost it, and was now playing her heart out in a room full of people who didn't expect anything from her. And suddenly, the room changed. The whispers stopped. The wine glasses froze mid-air. Gregory sat up straighter in his chair, no longer smirking. The sound wrapped around everyone like a wave. It was raw, beautiful, and honest. Some closed their eyes. Some stared at her hands, amazed at how fast and graceful they moved. Some felt something strange in their chest, a tightness, a memory, a feeling they couldn't explain. Emily's body swayed slightly with the rhythm. Her face remained calm, but her fingers spoke for her. Every note carried emotion, grief, hope, joy, and pain, all mixed into one song. She didn't look at the audience. Once, she didn't need to. The piano was her world now, and for the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. She played for almost 6 minutes. When she finally hit the last note, a soft, fading whisper of a sound, there was silence. Deep, full silence. Then slowly, the audience began to clap, one by one. People stood. Applause filled the room like thunder rolling across the sky. People cheered, some with tears in their eyes. The same ones who had whispered and doubted her were now giving her a standing ovation. Gregory stood too, his eyes wide, mouth slightly open, glass forgotten in his hand. He didn't speak. He couldn't. The performance had stunned him. Emily stood, bowed slightly, and gave a soft smile. Then, without waiting for praise, she turned and walked off the stage. Backstage, her legs almost gave out. Her hands shook, but not from fear anymore. From release. From something she had held inside for far too long, finally being let out. Mr. David met her and wrapped her in a quick hug. That, he whispered, was magic. She didn't reply, but she just nodded, holding back tears. Out in the lounge, Gregory handed his glass to a server, and started walking toward the back, pushing past guests. His usual confidence was gone. He looked shaken, like someone who had seen something he couldn't explain when he reached her. She was still catching her breath. He looked at her not like before, not with mockery or amusement, but with curiosity, maybe even respect. "Where? Did you learn to play like that?" he asked. Emily looked up, her voice soft but steady. "My father taught me, before he died." Gregory was quiet. After a long pause, he spoke again. "You don't belong out there with trays, I know," she said simply, and she walked away, leaving him standing alone. The audience continued to buzz with excitement. Phones came out, people asking for her name, wondering if she had an album where they could hear more. In a matter of minutes, the waitress they once overlooked became the star of the night. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know if this performance would lead to anything big. But in that moment, none of it mattered, because she had played, and the world had finally listened. Emily sat in the quiet hallway behind the lounge, her hands still trembling from the performance. Her fingers had stopped playing, but her heart was still pounding in her chest like a drum. It felt like the sound of the piano still echoed in her bones. She didn't expect what had just happened. She had walked out expecting awkward silence, or maybe polite clapping. But not that, not the standing ovation, not the shocked faces, not the silence before the applause that told her they had truly listened. She tried to take a deep breath, but it caught in her throat. Her eyes were stinging, and she wiped them quickly before anyone saw. Mr. David, the lounge manager, stood beside her with a proud smile. "You don't even know what you just did out there," he whispered. She looked at him, her face still a bit dazed. "I didn't think they'd react like that." "You didn't just play music," he said. "You told them your whole story. They felt every bit of it." Inside the lounge, the guests were still buzzing. People were walking around excitedly, talking about the performance like it had been the highlight of the night. Even those who barely cared about music before were asking questions. Who is she? Was that an original piece? She a student somewhere? No one believed she was just a waitress. Gregory Hawthorne stood near the bar, still holding his wine glass, untouched since the moment Emily began to play. His face was unreadable. For once he wasn't making jokes. Wasn't mocking anyone. Wasn't trying to be the loudest person in the room. He was thinking deeply. The woman he had once ridiculed had just silenced a room full of millionaires and artists. And the strange part, he felt something when she played. Something he hadn't felt in years. He had heard thousands of pianists. In his life technically perfect, beautifully trained, but none had moved him the way Emily did. There was something different in her sound, something real. A woman from the Art Council approached him. "Gregory, that girl, do you know her?" Gregory blinked, then shook his head slowly. "I thought I did," he said. But I was wrong." Backstage, Emily was still sitting quietly, trying to calm herself down when a man in a suit entered. The hallway end looked around, seemed slightly nervous, like he wasn't sure if he was in the right place. "Excuse me," he said to Mr. David. "Is the pianist still here?" Mr. David nodded toward Emily. The man turned to her, offering a small, respectful smile. "I'm from the New York Music Foundation," he said. "I was invited tonight as a guest, and I wanted to tell you that your performance was breathtaking." Emily stood up slowly, her voice unsure. "Thank you," he continued. "We offer scholarships to talented musicians who don't have the resources to study professionally. If you're interested, we would like to hear more from you." She stared at him, not sure if she was dreaming. Mr. David stepped forward. "She's interested." The man handed her a card with his contact details and smiled again. "Call me tomorrow. Don't wait." Before she could say more, another person entered the hallway this time. It was Gregory. Emily tensed a little, remembering the way he had mocked her not so long ago. But his expression had changed. He wasn't smirking. He looked serious, even thoughtful. "Emily," he said quietly. She turned to face him, not speaking. He paused for a moment, then said, "I was wrong about you." She raised an eyebrow slightly, unsure what he meant. "I thought you were just a waitress," he continued. "But tonight, you showed me you're an artist." She looked him in the eye, calm and steady. "I've always been an artist," she said. "You've just never looked closely enough." He nodded slowly, as if accepting her words. "That was the most powerful performance I've seen in years." Emily didn't say anything. There was a silence between them, but not an angry one. Felt like understanding. Gregory seemed to struggle with his next words, then finally said, "I want to help you." She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because I believe in talent," he replied. "And yours deserves to be shared." She waited. "I'll sponsor your first public concert," he said. "Can pick the place, the music, whatever you want. I'll take care of everything else. No strings attached." Emily was stunned. Just hours ago, this man had mocked her in front of his friends. Now, he was offering her a stage. She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity," Gregory said quickly. "It's a second chance for both of us. For me to support real talent, and for you to let the world hear what I heard tonight." She considered his words, the heaviness of the offer. "Why now?" she asked. "Why the change?" Gregory took a deep breath. "Because when you played, I remembered what it felt like to believe in something real, and I haven't felt that in years." There was something sincere in his eyes. Not the arrogance she'd seen before, but honesty. Emily nodded. I'll think about it." That night, as the guests slowly left and the hotel quieted down again, Emily stood at the grand piano once more. The lounge was empty now, just her and the keys. She placed her fingers on them, not to perform this time, but to thank them for never leaving her, even when the world did. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if she'd become famous, or if this was just one special night that would never happen again. But she did know this. Something had changed. Not just in the people who had heard her play, but in herself. For the first time in years, she believed again. Believed that maybe her music wasn't meant to stay hidden in shadows. Believed that maybe her father had been right all along. She was meant for more, and now the world finally knew it. The day after her unforgettable performance, Emily woke up with a mixture of excitement and nervousness swirling inside her chest. The world outside her small apartment seemed the same, the birds chirping, neighbors chatting, and the distant hum of traffic, but inside her mind, everything had changed. She had stepped into a new chapter of her life, one filled with possibility and hope. The phone call came in the afternoon. It was the man from the New York Music Foundation, the one who had approached her after the show. His voice was warm and encouraging as he told her that the foundation wanted to offer her a full scholarship to study piano at one of the best music schools in the city. This was more than Emily had ever dared to dream. The opportunity to finally get professional training, to learn from masters, to play on stages where her music could touch thousands of hearts, it was all within reach. At the same time, Gregory Hawthorne, the millionaire who had once mocked her, reached out as well. He invited her to a private meeting to discuss how he wanted to support her career. Emily felt a mix of curiosity and caution. Could someone who had once insulted her truly become an ally? She decided to meet him anyway, feeling that this was part of the journey she had to take. When she entered Gregory's office, she was surprised. It was filled with paintings, sculptures, and books about music and art. He greeted her with a smile that was different from before, genuine and respectful. "Emily," he said, "I want to apologize for the way I treated you. I was wrong to judge you before knowing you. Your music showed me that." She nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I want to help you succeed," he continued. "Not because I want to control you or your music, but because I truly believe in your talent. I want to organize your first public concert, cover the costs, and help you find an audience." Emily thought about this offer carefully. It wasn't easy to accept help, especially from someone who had been harsh, but she realized that sometimes life gave second chances, and it was up to her to take them. The weeks that followed were filled with preparations. Emily balanced her job at the hotel with piano lessons funded by the scholarship. She practiced tirelessly, pouring every ounce of emotion into the music. Her story became well known around the hotel and soon reached local newspapers. People were inspired by the waitress who had captured the hearts of millionaires and strangers alike with her raw talent and humble spirit. The night of the concert arrived, and the venue was packed with people, friends, family, music lovers, and even some of the wealthy guests from Gregory's circles. Emily walked onto the stage dressed simply, but with a new confidence shining in her eyes. She sat at the grand piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. Her music was more powerful than ever. Each note told a story of hardship, hope, loss, and triumph. The audience listened, captivated, some wiping away tears. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Emily stood and bowed, a smile spreading across her face. She knew this was only the beginning. After the concert, Emily received offers to perform in other cities. She signed with a small music label that believed in her. Her life was changing rapidly, but she stayed grounded, remembering the years she had spent invisible. The nights spent playing alone in the hotel lounge, Gregory continued to support her, attending her shows and introducing her to important people. In the art world, their relationship had transformed from mocking strangers to respectful partners in the world of music and culture. Emily's mother, who had struggled with illness for years, was proud beyond words. She came to every concert she could, holding Emily's hand tightly before each performance. Emily dedicated many of her pieces to her parents, the man who had given her the gift of music, and the woman who had taught her strength through her journey. Emily learned that talent alone wasn't enough. It was perseverance, courage, and the willingness to embrace unexpected opportunities that made the difference. She never forgot where she came from, the quiet waitress who once felt invisible. That memory kept her humble and kind, always ready to lift others up. Her story spread beyond the city, inspiring many people who felt overlooked or discouraged. Emily became a symbol of hope that sometimes the world's harshest critics can become the biggest supporters, that the smallest voices can create the loudest music, and that true talent will always find a way to be heard. Years later, when Emily was invited to speak at music schools and charity events, she would tell her story honestly about the mistakes, the pain, and the moments when she wanted to give up. But most importantly, about the power of belief in herself and in the kindness of others. She ended her talks with a simple message: never stop playing your music, no matter how quiet it may seem, because one day the world might just stop and listen. And when it does, everything can change. The luxury hotel restaurant buzzed with the soft hum of conversation, clinking glasses, and the quiet footsteps of waiters in polished black shoes. The chandeliers sparkled overhead like stars caught inside the building, and everything about the place screamed elegance. Rich guests arrived in tailored suits and glittering dresses, laughing as they spoke about business, art, and their next vacations. They ordered expensive dishes without looking at the price, and rarely looked into the eyes of the people serving them. Among those servers was a young woman named Emily. She was quiet, almost invisible to the guests. She wore the same crisp, white shirt and black apron as the others, but there was something about her that made people overlook her. Maybe it was the way she kept her eyes down when speaking, or how she didn't smile like the other waiters. She wasn't rude, just ... distant, as if she was physically present. But her mind was somewhere else entirely. Emily had worked at the hotel for over a year. She came in on time, never complained, and always did her job properly. But she wasn't close to anyone. Most of her coworkers liked her, but didn't know much about her. Some whispered that she was a little strange, always humming quietly while folding napkins or tapping her fingers on the counter as if playing an invisible piano. But nobody really paid attention. She was just another face in the background, another worker lost in the sea of luxury. That evening, the hotel was hosting a high-profile event. Some of the city's most important business people were attending, including Gregory Hawthorne, a millionaire known for investing in young artists and collectors. He was a sharp, well-dressed man in his late 50s, always seen with a cigar in hand and a glass of aged scotch. Gregory believed he had an eye for talent, spoke with confidence, made people laugh with biting sarcasm, and loved being the center of attention. He entered the restaurant with his usual entourage: Other wealthy men and two women dressed in sparkling gowns. The maître d' greeted them with a smile and led them to the best table, right in the center of the room. Emily was assigned to serve them. She approached their table with a tray of water glasses. Her hands were steady, but her heart beat faster. She recognized Gregory right away. Everyone did. He was often in the magazines that lay in the hotel lobby. She gently placed a glass in front of one of the women, then another before Gregory. But just as she reached the final glass, it slipped slightly, and a small splash of water spilled onto the white tablecloth. Wasn't a lot, barely enough to notice, but Gregory did. He looked down at the wet spot, then up at Emily with a mocking smile. "Well, that's impressive," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "A waitress who can't serve water without turning it into a swimming pool." The people around him laughed. Emily froze for a moment, then whispered, "I'm so sorry, sir," and quickly grabbed a napkin to dry the spill. Her cheeks turned red, but she didn't argue. She didn't look up at him either. Just cleaned the spot and quietly stepped back. Gregory wasn't done. "You know," he continued, smirking as he sipped his drink, "you'd think a place this expensive would hire people who know how to handle a glass. Or maybe you're just practicing to be a performance artist." Very abstract. His friends laughed again, and even the two women giggled behind their hands. She gave a small nod and walked away to the service area, holding the empty tray against her chest like a shield. She didn't cry. She was used to this kind of thing. Maybe not always in such a loud public way, but people like Gregory didn't see her. Not as a person, anyway. To them, she was just part of the background, like the wallpaper or the furniture. In the corner, the maître d' had seen everything. He was a kind older man who had worked at the hotel for nearly 2 decades. He liked Emily. He didn't know much about her personal life, but he knew she worked hard, never complained, and treated everyone with quiet dignity. He shook his head slightly as Gregory laughed and turned back to his group. At Emily, who stood with her head down and gave her a sympathetic nod. She didn't see it, but it was there. Emily returned to the kitchen area and took a deep breath. She wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of being seen as less, tired of being spoken to like she didn't matter. She had grown used to fading into the background. It was easier that way. If people didn't see you, they couldn't hurt you. But even in the silence of her mind, music played. Always. It was like a soft echo in her chest, a reminder of a life she once dreamed of, before she had to become the responsible one. Before bills and illness and grief took over, Emily had been someone else, someone full of hope. She had played piano every day as a child, hours of practice, hours of joy. She loved classical music, especially Chopin and Debussy, and had even started writing her own melodies. Her father had saved every penny to buy her a used upright piano when she was just 9. He would sit beside her and listen, his eyes closed, letting the music wash over him. But after he died in a car accident when she was 16, everything changed. Her mother became sick and money ran out. Emily dropped out of music school, sold the piano, and started working full-time jobs, whatever she could find. Restaurants, cleaning services, grocery stores, and now here she was. A young woman with strong hands made for art, reduced to wiping down tables while people like Gregory made jokes at her expense. She didn't hate them. She didn't even feel jealous. Just numbed that night. After her shift ended, Emily walked through the empty restaurant. The lights were dim, the noise gone. In the lounge area, a beautiful black grand piano stood untouched. It had been placed there for ambience, but no one really played it. Sometimes Emily would pass it and pause, her fingers itching to touch the keys, but she never did. Not when anyone was around. Tonight, she checked to make sure the coast was clear. Then she sat down slowly on the bench. Her hands hovered above the keys. She closed her eyes, and she played. The notes came out soft, at first hesitant, like a whisper in the dark. Then stronger, more confident. Her fingers remembered even when her heart had forgotten. The music filled the empty space, rich and warm, like a story without words. She played a piece she had written when she was 14, right after her father had surprised her with her first real piano. was gentle, filled with rising hope and quiet sorrow. She didn't know that the lounge manager had returned for his forgotten phone and was now standing in the shadows, listening. When she finished, she didn't look around. She simply stood, gave the piano one last look, and disappeared into the night. But that one moment and scene by the people who mocked her was the first thread in something much bigger than she could imagine. It would not be long before the world found out that the quiet waitress had a voice louder than any words could ever express.